Hello, everybody. Welcome to Just Talk Live. And if you haven't noticed, it is just me right now. Destiny is had some technical issues and may or may not join us during this time. But for right now, you have me. And so I wanted to welcome everybody to Just Talk Live and to introduce the topic. But before that, I wanted to remind everybody that Just Talk Live is a partnership between the Young Adult Volunteer Program of the Presbyterian Church USA and Justice Unbound, which is also a ministry of the Peace USA. And the Presbyterian Church USA will be having a week of action next week. Every day of next week, we will be talking and speaking about speaking about racial justice and speaking out against racial injustice. So every day next week, tune in to the Presbyterian Church USA's social media. There will be live streams. There will be videos. There will be a Twitter chat going on Twitter. So check that out and check out the work that the Presbyterian Church USA is doing. So wanted to mention that and wanted to invite all of everybody who is watching this to be a part of that. So our topic today is environmental justice, and we are going to be welcoming our guest on. We're going to be welcoming Emma Lockridge and Abby mohaupt, and I hope I said that right, Abby. You can correct me when you come back on to the show. So we are going to welcome them, and we are going to talk about environmental justice. So let us welcome our guest. Hello, how are y'all?
Hi.
Good, how are y'all?
Nice to be here today.
And Abby, did I say your name right?
When a bunch of Germans came to the United States, they changed the pronunciation. So what you said is totally fine.
Okay. Perfect. And yeah, thank y'all for being here to talk about environmental justice with everyone who is watching. And I wanted to give y'all a chance to introduce yourselves. So we'll start with Emma and Abby. So Emma, if you would please introduce yourself to our audience, that would be great.
Surely. Good afternoon. I'm Emma Lockridge, and I'm a resident of Detroit, Michigan. I live in a community called Detroit 48217. Sadly, we acquired the title of the most polluted zip code in the entire state of Michigan. And that is because we have these massive facilities that necklace our community, if you will, that emit millions of pounds of pollution throughout the year, over 28 polluting facilities that include an oil refinery, steel mills, our Detroit Water and Sewerage Department, which cleans the water for the entire region. And when I say they clean the water and process it, when people flush the toilet, if you ever wonder where it goes, it kind of hits towards our direction and toward our direction. And so because of that, they process it and they burn off some of it, which is called sludge. They burn it near us, and then some of it they bake and turn it into fertilizer near us. I call that the Queasy Bake Oven. You don't ever want to accidentally get a whiff of it on a bad day. And so we have asphalt facilities, just an array. Even one of these facilities in your community would be really bad news. But when you have the cumulative impact of all of them, you can imagine that it has a very horrific impact on our health. So that's who I am, and I am an environmental justice organizer in my community. I've drawn attention to some of these problems, and I've been trying to get some solutions to some of these problems.
Awesome. Thank you. Abby?
Hi. So my name is Abby Mohaupt, and I'm an ordained minister in the Peace USA. And I'm a minister member of San Francisco Presbytery, but I live in Grace Presbytery in rural Texas on a regenerative agriculture farm where we raise a bunch of chickens and are getting ready to welcome cows to our farm. I'm also the moderator of Fossil Free Peace USA that has for the last 8 years, just about, has worked in the Presbyterian Church to get fossil fuels out of our investments, and also work with a variety of partners to make climate justice and environmental justice a bigger talking point in our theological and worship and church life. And then I'm also the director of education and training for an international environmental nonprofit that does interfaith work, empowering people of faith to respond to the urgency of environmental issues through the lens of environmental justice, which often makes me feel like I'm more of an academic than an activist or a practitioner, which is related, I think, a little bit to who I am as a white woman. And so my hope is to constantly work towards being on the front lines instead of truly embracing the privilege that I have to be able to walk away from things like climate change and environmental devastation.
Well, thank you all for being here, and thank you for the work that you are doing. And I know a lot of times we throw around terms that are not often familiar for some people. So environmental justice may not be something that people are familiar with who may be watching. And what does that mean? So I wanted to start our conversation off speaking about what is environmental justice, and what does that mean for us right now. And so yeah, we'll start in the same order. So Emma, what does that mean, environmental justice?
And that's a great question. And Lee, I'm glad you said we're just having a conversation here, which is always a wonderful thing to do. I'm going to start with our government, US government. The Environmental Protection Agency actually has a definition that I'll read to you. It says environmental justice is the fair treatment and meaningful involvement of all people, regardless of race, color, national origin, or income, with respect to the development, implementation, and enforcement of environmental laws, regulations, and policies. And that's really cute and a whole bunch of words that don't mean a whole lot to people who look like me. Black people, in fact, are trapped in poisonous places across the country, if not the world. And to understand why we are in an environmental justice problem right now, you would have to go back to the founding of this country and pull forward from enslavement all the way up to this point. And I'll just go back even a few years, basically in the 40s and 50s, during the Great Migration, when my parents moved here for a better life, trying to escape the apartheid Jim Crow laws of the South, where your very survival of waking up and living was a struggle down there. So they came here looking for better jobs, better future for families, and that kind of thing. And when they arrived here, what they found was there was a different kind of racism in the North. We call it up South. There were no signs. We never saw like no coloreds or black and white, but it existed. Black people couldn't just come here and say, oh, I think I'll go get a job there. They were only hiring white women in specific kinds of jobs. You couldn't say, I think I'll just go buy a house over there. You couldn't go buy a house over there because they had these zones where everybody lived in a zone. The last 2 digits of your zip code used to be your zone you lived in. So zone 17 was industrial-like. So if you lived in this zone, you were automatically had to buy homes in zones like ours. And zones like ours usually were near factories. zones near ours were always near places of rendering plants, facilities. If you were killing, say, hogs to kill, we were always placed in an area that would not be conducive to raising a healthy family. So we ended up here surrounded by all of these factories. We didn't know what environmental justice meant. We didn't understand that these factories that were spewing these black clouds into the sky, or these horrific odors we were smelling, which right now outside of my house I can smell as I speak. We did not, our parents didn't know that they were putting our health in jeopardy. They had already had like a good start in the South with their health and eating, but it's the children, the kids of my generation, the boomers, who we caught the brunt of this. Like, for instance, around the block from my house right now, the playground where I played on, went to elementary school, is a brownfield with 5 acres of lead contaminated soil over there. So you can imagine we were playing in lead soil and doing things like that. So for me, environmental justice is so tied to what America is, and it's the systemic problems that we have. This is just another part of that problem. Environmental justice for me means that I would be able to live just like most of the white people in this country, who are able to just go out and grow a garden in the backyard and feel okay about it, to have their children maybe go outside and play and feel okay about it, not have to be worried that their children are going to have horrific asthma rates, or that their children are going to be getting lead out of the air, so they're going to have learning disabilities that could show up later in life, where it could come out as a violent behavior. So environmental justice to me would just mean being fairly treated and being able to have the same access to clean air, clean water, clean soil as the majority, as most Americans wake up to every day, and not to have these zones. And we call them sacrifice zones now. Forget the zip code and that 117 48217 now reflects the sacrifice zone that Black people live in. And we have these zones around the country, whether you're talking in Texas, near the refineries, if you're talking about pig farms, sometimes it could be, you need to know that if you're near these farms, what can happen to you. So it's like all of these things. That's what environmental justice is to me and to the people that work with me and live around me.
Addie?
Yeah, I'm just thinking about how much I don't have to add, except that the environmental racism and injustice that Emma lifted up reminds me of the sacrifice that we have in climate change. That there are areas of the world that we've just decided internationally that it's okay if those communities experience climate change, because they're usually developing nations or nations that have been historically colonized by European nations. They're almost always countries and regions that are people of color. So that's like global climate, environmental racism. And that's another kind of environmental injustice. And when we're working towards environmental justice, we're saying everyone should have access to the beauty of the world, and the gardening that Emma said, and the being able to step outside and see the stars, being able to jump in the ocean, to drink clean water, that everyone should have access to that, and that no one group of people is sharing the burden of environmental pollution or climate change, that we're sharing the blessing and the burden across race, ethnicity, nation of origin. I'm an eco-feminist, so I think about how women often are asked to carry the brunt of environmental justice, that we're really saying everyone deserves clean air, clean water, and the experience of joy in the outdoors if they want it.
Yeah, I think that gives people a good idea of what it means, of what this means. Environmental justice is the intersection of our being and our human like right to be able to enjoy God's creation. And but there are injustices in our world, the systemic racism and white supremacy within our world that hold some people away from that that human dignity and that the blessing to really enjoy God's creation. And so I'm very grateful for both of you being here, to really talk about this. And I wonder now, specifically being in a pandemic and being in a space to where we are confined, but there are so many things that are being uncovered for so many people, for the first time, about racial injustice, about all these things that people are grappling with right now. And Emma talked a little bit about this before we started, how this pandemic has affected um, vulnerable populations that are both experiencing environmental injustice and how it has just really exacerbated that. So I wanted to talk about that and how and how we are seeing that right now. And so I wonder, Emma, if you could also kind of talk about that as well, how you are seeing that where you're at.
When the pandemic first hit, we have an amazing governor, Governor Gretchen, which we nicknamed Big Gretch because she stands up to Washington and the madness coming from that direction. I clearly remember about a month into it when we were not moving around. Downtown looked like a ghost town, and people were on TV saying, "Oh, we got to get back to normal. We have to get back to normal." And I'm thinking, I'm not in a rush to get back to where we were, because for the first time, I'm coming outside and I'm not smelling those horrific odors. I'm not seeing all that traffic burning all those fossil fuels. I'm not seeing all of those airplanes crisscross the sky. I've seen a stillness where people need to be still for a minute and think about, what is this world? Where do I fit into it? Where do I want it to look like? What do I want it to look like after this? And there can be something different. If we're able to do this for a month, why can't we do it for another month and another month? And why can't we be smarter? Do we really have to move millions of people into buildings that are stacked high into the sky and burn all that extra fuel and have those people stressed driving down the freeways when in fact they could have been sitting at home getting some things done and maybe have more energy and save more money? For us as an environmental justice community, our focus changed greatly. We have not focused as much on the polluters as we have on the people. We're in survival mode, if you will. What I thought about, Harvard released a study that said people who live in environmental justice communities, and that means you're surrounded by pollution, that you're going to be at a greater risk for COVID problems and death. And so, and that's because we're already impacted by issues related to respiratory distress. We have a super high rate of asthma. We have a very high rate of people with lung issues. We have a very high rate of diabetes. We have a lot of these problems that if you have COVID, your chances of survival might be not as good as someone from a healthier community. So we said, well, one thing we can do is on the east of us to the west, north, south, they're doing testing, and there's nothing here in our community for our people to know what's going on. So we fought very hard. I have an amazing core team we formed called the Tri-Cities United that links 3 of the zip codes out here that are surrounded by the most pollution, that are predominantly Black, and we're all together. And we worked at it hard enough to now every Wednesday we offer COVID testing in our community. because oftentimes people don't have transportation. If they had it downtown or the east side, people may not have been able to go there. So we made it so that you could walk to our test site, ride a bike, drive, but we made sure that people would have access. And that way, we had 7 people test positive over the past couple of weeks. We also decided to focus on food security. I live in a food desert. There is no grocery store here, period. Not one. They all are in the suburbs. And so that means we have had very large food giveaways here. So we made sure that people are abreast where they can go get fresh produce and meats and vegetables and juices and milk and dairy and everything. Every week you can get some food here. So we wanted to make sure we're not giving away the food, although my church does. My church is involved in the food giveaway, but we make sure that every week people can be fed. We're trying to test to see if they have COVID and any other resources, right? If they might be facing evictions and things like that. At Michigan United, that is I should have mentioned, by the way, I work for Michigan United, and we have been very much focused on the eviction side and all of the things that you would get when and you have economic insecurity too. So that's what COVID meant for us. COVID meant coming together as a community, protecting each other, loving each other more. And I'm going to tell you guys, one of the best things that came out of this was that there were people out here who were on different sides of issues and occasionally maybe didn't get along and that kind of thing. That melted away. We're just one big family, a loving family. We all work together. We don't have those disagreements anymore. We knew that first couple of weeks, forget it. We were calling each other, doing a call around, and we have formed like a 15-member core group. And we are just transforming, hope to transform the community and do some amazing things. So that's how COVID has personally, impacted us.
And Abby, how have you seen it impact in your context? I wonder.
So I've been thinking about this in a couple of different ways. One, my everyday job, working at this nonprofit, doing environmental work, meant that I was flying all over the world. And it was this like ironic hypocrisy that I had made enough air mileage that I was regularly getting bumped into first class by because I was traveling around the world talking about climate change and climate injustice. I haven't really been in an airplane. I had to fly for one trip, but otherwise have not been on a plane since February, which is, as my mom has said, that's the longest I've stayed in one place forever. But I'm thinking about how many of us have had to stay put, have had to slow down, have had to use fewer fossil fuels and rely on our neighbors in a different way, and to know our particular place in a much different way. Emma talked about how COVID has meant that people aren't going in to work, they're staying home. And I think what we're discovering is that for some people that's better. Obviously it's hard if you have children or like if you're trying to do anything. This spring I was teaching a couple of students who are like, my kid's gonna be in class with me, like because they're home and I'm home. Right, so it's like not a perfect solution, but I think what it is opening up is this ability for us to say, I can slow down. I can stay home. I can do almost everything that it means to be human by on Zoom, right? And I think it's also made us not take each other for granted. That we understand how deeply connected we are and need to be in order to be fully human. And I think climate change has happened so quickly because we have been unwilling to see how connected we are, that our individual and global and political choices impact other people. And that COVID is saying to us, how you live and exist in the world affects other people. What we do matters. So those are some of the things I've been thinking about. And I think I have also been thinking about and watching how many of my colleagues colleagues who are white and upper class are experiencing like social boundaries in a way that they've never experienced them before, right? Like suddenly, right? Like suddenly white people can't do whatever they want, right? And and so like they're like, I'm uncomfortable, I don't like this. And like and I'm feeling it too, right? Like let's be honest. So like I'm used to doing whatever, going wherever I want and doing whatever I want. And like nobody can tell me what to do. And my like colleagues of color are like, welcome to our world. Literally everything about me is all the time. And
That's
you know,
great.
right? So like Emma, like you're talking about how like in the South during like Jim Crow laws, like you couldn't go wherever you wanted to go, and now white people are finally like being told you can't do whatever you want. And I was in Texas, and I could not explain clearly enough how many white people in my community were like, "No, I'm going to do whatever I want. You can't."
Well, you know what? You should have seen when our governor, said we're going to have to close things, and you can't do boating, and you can't do this. The white people actually went to the Capitol with their rifles and assault weapons.
I know.
And we're in the chamber standing there like, they're taking away our liberty. You're trying to live here, people. And you're worried that you put on a mask. And you're like, how can you do this to us? Because there's been no boundaries. It's a level that's all out. You're wearing a mask just like the person next to you.
Yeah. And yeah. So, and I feel it, right? Like there are moments where I'm like, I want to do whatever I want, actually. I like that. I like being able to do whatever I want. That's like how I know that white privilege is as like sexy as it is, right? Because people like to do whatever they want. And also like it's a reminder to me that like we're dumb and like to do things that make our lives easier unless we're forced to do it in order to take care of other people. And like I just think like every time I see somebody not putting on a mask, I think this is why we have climate change, because people won't make their lives just a little bit harder or inconvenient. Just a little bit. It's a little bit. A little bit.
A little.
And so so I'm watching a bunch of white people wake up now. And obviously I'm not perfect, right? Like I have a lot of anti-racism work to do. Like I'm as racist as most progressive white ladies. And I'm watching more people wake up to it than ever before. Some of it because of the uprisings around the country, insisting that we hold police accountable, but some of it's about just realizing, people of color always have to live in boundaries and can't do whatever they want. So
the uprisings, I am so proud of our young people. Yes. I'm that person out on the front lines with that picket sign and during COVID, I've been very quiet and just watching them on TV. And I just want to give a shout out to all of the young people who have gone out there with Black Lives Matter around the world. Yeah. And I don't think that could have happened if we didn't have COVID, because it was just so quiet. And then all of a sudden they went out there in such huge numbers. And I think that we saw things start changing that people have been trying to do for years. For instance, Mississippi is now trying to think of a new flag design. It took all of this, George Floyd, I'm sorry he lost his life, but sometimes that one, because if you think about the succession of people who have been murdered like that, who have died like that, but his death, it's the timing on it and everything, where people could in full force respond to that, the timing. And when they went out immediately took those to the streets around the world, in suburbs here, near my house, people came out, and I see the signs still out there at their houses. And so, yeah, this has been an amazing year, just a pivotal year in a lot of ways. Just an amazing. I do wonder how this COVID is going to come out, but it has been a game changer, I think, for the good, in a sense, because this is not going away. The Black Lives Matter, how we treat people, how are we really coming together in this country? So yeah, Abby, I agree. It's very powerful.
Yeah, I'm wondering if, Emma, what do you think about the idea that more people are joining protests because they're already at home, so they don't have to travel, or they're not? COVID makes me so exhausted, but I don't have to travel for work, so I'm able to think more about protests.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Definitely. I think it did. And it was just like I said, it was just the perfect timing. They had been kind of bottled up anyway. And then, you're in your feelings. They've had time to think.
Yeah.
And then it was so vivid on TV. No one could argue with that. When you see a knee on somebody's neck and they have their hands relaxed in the pocket, you could disagree with what was right about that moment, So how do you justify that moment? And so to have the people just come out into the streets from, like I said, everyone, Japan, it was some countries that I had never seen, and this thing, my Native American friends have been trying for years to get like the Redskins to change their name. I think it was a catalyst. George Floyd, along with all the other deaths, going back to Emmett Till, on to the people we don't even know their names who were sacrificed. It was a catalyst. His death was a catalyst for some super changes. And a lot of things have happened behind the scenes in terms of change that people don't even know about. That's not to say we don't have a lot of work to go, because people still are accepting a doctrine of racism and white supremacy. There are still enough people in this country and around the world, and you travel around the world, so you know what I mean. I was kind of stunned when I went to South Africa about 4 years ago to see that I was in Johannesburg to see where they were doing mining. Right, I went to the Soweto. I was very I was very, very disturbed to see that where they had done all this mining, they had all these huge, looked like small mountains surrounding the township. But the gentleman who was driving us said, "Cover your face, because we're gonna go through like this film of dust that's gonna be coming off of that, and it's very unhealthy. So you cover your face to drive through." And what we realized was that those mountains where they had extracted gold, new white, these firms that come in, international firms, to go back into that to see if they could find more gold and other minerals and disturb that. But by disturbing it, they were causing cancer. It was releasing in that dust cancer-causing agents below. So the people in Soweto were getting cancer because they were disturbing the mountain again. It's like, this is global. What's happening? Fortunately, they did have a lawsuit at that point. We're suing the companies that came back in to unearth the earth that they had stacked up out of the ground. So yeah, it's an international problem. I never think about environmental justice whether we're talking about going into your rainforest or Africa, the Congo. We all sit here, look, we all have our cell phones, right? But people don't know that children are dying in the Congo. So I could sit here on my computer looking at you and my iPad that makes me happy so that I can operate it, because they need the components that they have, the children, tiny children have to go in first to make it possible to mine, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So when I talk about environmental justice, it's not just a finger. I'm not saying, oh, white people. We all cause this problem, everybody. If you don't know that, if you're Black, all of us contribute to this. So we're going to have to, as a world, figure out how we can do a better, a more just situation, not only for ourselves in this a community like Detroit, but those people in Soweto who are sitting there with this new cloud of dust whirling around, getting into their lungs, causing them cancer. And that's where we're not there yet. We're not even anywhere close to, like, what can we all do? If you're a young person, what can you do? What can I do to make this better? Because if we all start thinking about what can we do personally, because it's some simple things, right?
Yeah.
Now that people haven't been driving, if they open your business back up, really try to carpooling so don't congest those freeways again. If you have a meeting, maybe it is okay now not to fly and all be in the same room. I know it's fun. I love travel to get out of here, go to a conference, see your friends, but we don't have to do it every time. You get to start thinking about what can we do now that we know. Consumerism, the worst. Listen, the best thing I got out of COVID for me is I stopped shopping. I only buy food. I bought one thing, a blender to make smoothies. And I was watching my bank account grow. And I was like, this is amazing. What was I wasting that money on, So if we could tap down the consumerism right there, we're going to save a lot of people, a lot of lives, a lot of resources that are being moved around that we don't need. Our disposable society,
Yeah.
I love your flowers. Abby grew those flowers. Come on, Abby.
Really?
They are beautiful.
I like that touch. I might have to, if I do another Zoom, just have my flowers
No, I've been doing this. This is the first time I've brought some of this in, and I love it. These are my flowers. These.
They are beautiful.
So you're on a farm. I'm gonna have to come visit you on the farm sometime.
Well, Emma, we can come visit. We would love to have you. You can cuddle up with some chickens, and we'll pull the vegetables out of the garden. And it's insane. Ugh.
That's living.
I love this energy. I love this. Because if y'all are making my job easy, because y'all are talking. But there was a comment put on Facebook that reminded me, because it was addressed to me, and so I'm going to show it. The folks who have newly realized or newly awakened to the racial injustices in our country are white. We need to name this, particularly as members of a majority white church. And that reminds me to remind myself of that. But it also reminds me that many people of faith often don't find themselves in these conversations when it comes to the environment, when it comes to justice work. And I'm going to plug the Week of Action again, because we've gotten a lot of pushback from that. You can go on Facebook and see that. And I would ask each of you, what do you say to people of faith when we're talking about environmental justice, but also when we're talking about systemic racism and white supremacy? What do you say to people of faith that are pushing back, that don't see our faith encompassing any of this? I think that's an important important thing for us as people of faith to wrestle with. So thank you to that person of reminding me that. But I also wanted to ask y'all, like, what do we say to people of faith who don't find themselves in this conversation? And anybody can
just
start
want
if you want.
to thank your church. I had a busload of people find me and come to Detroit. When you were in Detroit, you went to Flint, and then you visited us at Michigan United, large group, and you allowed me to give a presentation about our community, and then you took a tour. Not only that, you came out on the bus, and I showed you what it was like so that you could have information in terms of what you plan to do as a church as it relates to climate change. So thank you so much for all you do. When I think about the environment and Christianity, or if you're a Muslim or whatever faith, well, I'm going to go with Christian. I'm going to talk about Christians because I'm of the Christian faith. So I'm going to just say this, but I think it might apply to others too. In the Bible, it starts off with, in the beginning, God created. And we start talking about the heavens, and the sky, and the stars, and all of this beautiful creation. And it's like, to me, one of the most beautiful stories ever written about anything. And as a person of faith, I honestly do not believe that God took the time to create all of this beauty, put us here for us to destroy it. I mean, I don't think it was God's vision to see a fish kill. I don't think it was God's vision to have layers of dirt surrounding my windowsill outside. And as I step outside, I want to choke on the air. I don't think that was God's vision when he created my body and my perfect set of lungs. I don't think it was God's creation to have the skies scarred with crisscrosses, so much so that, we get the acid rain. So when God creates the water, it evaporates, it comes down, we get the rain, and then you need to wash your car because it's so filthy. Yeah. I don't believe it was his plan. And so I don't think that was God's plan. And so I would say, respect what was created. Respect what was created. When I had my daughter, I was thinking, oh, God, thank you. You think I am worthy? Am I really worthy to be the person to nurture this young soul, I can hold her in my hands. I have to breastfeed her and nurture her. She was inside of me for 9 months. You gave me I was the vessel. And now you've turned her over to me. God, thank you. Thank you for blessing me with my Sarah. But I don't think God gave me Sarah to abuse her, to make her life miserable. I don't think God gave me Sarah to destroy her life. And God did not give us this planet, our creator, whatever you call it. If it's creator, whatever you think of, that made the world and all of these beautiful things that I photograph all the time, the flowers and the butterflies and the trees and the streams and the water, all the things I love to photograph on a daily basis. I do not believe God put this here for us to make them ugly. And for those people out there who don't want to think about the environment, I do want you to think about that if you are of faith and you are entrusted. You are entrusted. The shepherd, you're a shepherd too. You're entrusted with this. What are you going to do with it? Because I respect it. I respect it. I respect every moon, every sunrise, the droplets of water, how they move differently every day. I respect all of this. And I respect this through my faith. And so that's what I would say to people out there. If you're of faith, what is that Bible in the beginning and God's creation? What does that really mean to you? And what is your role in it?
And in Genesis 2, God gives the very first commandment to the first humans, which is to take care of the earth. Like, that's before anything else. Like, take care of the earth. And then he says, love each other, right? And what are we doing? What? Like, that's it. Like, respect God, love the earth, love each other. That's the thing. And this is what I come back to, is when a million years ago, more than 10 years ago, when I was in the ordination process and moving from being an inquirer to a candidate to like moving up the ranks of being ordained, I stood in front of the presbytery and said, I want to do environmental ministry. And somebody stood up and said, what does caring for the environment have to do with Christianity? And it was an adult. And I just like, I didn't know how to answer because I was like, what do you mean? Of course it has something to do with it. If you open the Bible to any section, you keep reading long enough, it talks about creation. Even in the like kind of boring books of the law, like you open up the book of Numbers and there's a real clear story about how we're supposed to listen to creation. Like, it's there. It's not political. And like, loving each other isn't political. Loving the earth isn't political. Loving God isn't political. It's people. And our willingness to take action is a way of living out our faith.
I like that word, love. You know, I'm glad you brought that into the conversation, Abby, because when I was raised in, when I was going to Sunday school, my Sunday school teacher and my pastor every week always said, God is love. And on our board where we had got our Sunday school lessons, that message was written at the very top before it was never erased.
Yeah,
every Sunday I went into church and the 3 words, God is love.
Yeah.
So what part are we missing here, people? It didn't say, you know, God is love. That's universal. That's everything.
Yes. And if we're like creating a system where some people have to breathe polluted air because we can't figure out an economic system that isn't racist, like that's not embodying the love that God's calling us to be. Like that's a spit in God's face. To me, it just seems so obvious that if we're trying to follow a God who is love, that's a conviction to work to make that love in all parts of our lives.
All parts. Amen.
Yeah, and it's I mean, the Christianity that has evolved is so far removed from the biblical text, and that there's been so much of an institutionalized race and some ways very racist systems, even within the church, even within church systems, that it has become a religion that is not of the teachings of Christ and a God of love and a God of creation, but it is a God of like the idolatry of exclusion and the idolatry of how can we and it is very easy to trace how that happens, but it's also how did it happen, because it is not supported by our faith and who we follow. And so it is very interesting to hear that the environment is a political issue, or racism is a political issue, because whenever the church had announced this week, the common comment was, why is my church being political? Why is my church saying things that are political? And this is something that is being said, and I want to lift that up for people, because it is something that you hear often, that we don't want the church to be political.
You don't want the church to be political. You know what, Lee? when I grew up, I started life in the South, and I was living here during the Civil Rights Movement. And honestly, I'm going to be very honest with you. When I used to watch the Ku Klux Klan burn those crosses and then strike that fear into my heart, as a little girl, I didn't even know white people were Christians. I was shocked. And as a matter of fact, when I came to Detroit and I started meeting white people who were in churches, I'm like, but I understand you. How can you be in church, but you use the symbol of Christ as this fear factor and to kill people and murder and lynch? And it took me a while. So finally I kept meeting people and I was like, well, they really are sincere. You know, they're white, but that doesn't mean that they don't believe in God, because I had the orientation that you take that symbol, like you said. So you say it's not political, but man can politicize it, right?
Yeah. Yep. Yep. Yep.
Love is love. You don't have to talk about politics if you really love people. Lee, you know?
She said, Lee, this is on you.
Yeah. No, I mean, yeah, when they ask that question, why are we talking politics? Are you kidding me?
Right.
Yeah.
These are some basic things that churches should be doing.
Mm-hmm.
Supporting a clean environment. What's political about that?
Yeah,
Right.
how is that political? Like I just like whenever people are like that, I just literally want to open up the Bible and be like, excuse me, this is Genesis 2:15.
Abby, you're oh, that's great.
Excuse me, this is Revelation 21. Hold on, I got
Right.
it.
Yeah,
Yep.
I mean, and it's all in there. It's all in there.
I got a psalm. Hold on.
Yeah,
Like,
it is all in there. And I had a professor in divinity school that always said, like, the Bible is, you know, the best-selling book, but it's also the least read.
It's true.
And it is the best-selling book, but the least read. And I really do think that that this conversation is very helpful for people. That this is not political issues. We get pushback from this show because they think it's political, but these are issues that are even talked about in Scripture. They were experienced by people in the Bible all the time. And that is why Scripture is a living word. If it was a done deal and we wouldn't even use it if it wasn't something that spoke to right now and was relevant. And so speaking, like, talking about this stuff and really putting it into perspective that this is not a political conversation. This is a moral conversation, and this is a faith-filled part of our faith. And so I appreciate that from both of you. And I did want to give you time. We have around like 7 minutes to offer up whoever's watching anything that can be helpful to them, how to get involved, resources that you may know. And we'll flash them up on the screen. So I wanted to give you time for that and any last words that you would like to say. So yeah, I wanted to offer that up to you.
Well, thank you for inviting me to be on the show and meeting Abby. This has been fantastic. And if you have any questions, you can reach me at emma@michiganunited.org. That's my email address, and I will respond to you. And I want our young people to stay involved, be involved in the environmental movement and things that are going on. And we need your voice. You're going to make the difference. You are making the difference. You are making, not you will, you are making the difference. And there is a book that I would suggest if you would like to learn more about sacrifice zones. There's a book called Sacrifice Zones by Steve Lerner, Lerner. Steve Lerner. Now, the book is, you can't go to the store and buy it. You order it off Amazon. And people usually have nicely copies that they'll send to you. It doesn't cost very much, but it's a book about case studies across the country about communities like the one I live in and what's going on, and some of the successes they've had in coming out of those problems and ongoing issues. So that's all I'd like to say is just thank you so much, Lee. It's been a pleasure spending this time with you, and Abby, also meeting you.
It's been a blessing. Thank you so much.
I'm looking forward to the next time, Lee, when you invite Emma and me onto this conversation so we can keep talking. This feels like an incredible gift. Thank you.
This could be episode 1. I mean, we can always do episode 2. So there could be.
Are we gonna have a spin-off? I feel like we could have a spin-off, like a or something, and
Spin-off.
and just shout about the Bible the whole time.
I like the way you this and that. Woo, I love that.
So I like to refer to myself as a free-range pastor. So I'm in Texas and not serving a church, but living on a farm and working with this environmental nonprofit. And the way that I get to keep my ordination is that I serve the church in lots of different ways. And thanks be to God for San Francisco Presbytery that has loved me into this free-ranginess. But I serve the church on Presbyterian Hunger Program. So if y'all watching this don't know Presbyterian Hunger Program, please go check them out. They're great. We are great. But also serve the denomination as the moderator of Fossil Free Peace USA, which, as I think I said before, we work in our denomination to do climate justice work primarily through a conversation about divestment from fossil fuels, understanding that the fossil fuel industry has targeted vulnerable communities and have refused to change their business models in order to make climate change go away. It's been really my gift and privilege to talk with people around the denomination around how we work towards climate justice in lots of different ways through our investments, but also through the ways in which we live in the world and how we engage fossil fuels in our own lives and policies and politics. We're doing a workshop tomorrow at 8 p.m. Eastern on how to get your presbytery to divest. And there's a bit.ly that I shared with Lee that maybe you can share. But you can also join us on Facebook at Fossil Free Peace USA, where there's a link to join us. And this has been such a privilege. I'm really grateful, Lee, for being invited onto this call. And Emma, what an incredible gift to meet you. And one of the things we know about environmental injustice and environmental racism and climate change is that we need to respond in all the ways we can. All of us need to do it in big and little ways. And what I'm so proud of the Presbyterian Church, that the argument about divestment has always been about how do we do that in the most just way? How do we make sure that all the voices are at the table? And I've learned so much from the people who have been my opponents and people that I've been delighted to call my friends, who've called me into a more just way of being in the world. And I really think that kind of radical understanding that we belong to each other, that we belong to God, that we belong to this place that we call home, that reorientation will change us and gives us, I think, faith to survive climate change and climate injustice and environmental injustice, and to do the work that our faith requires of us.
Awesome. Well, amen to this conversation. I think this was a big prayer and a call to action. So we'll say amen to all of this. And I am very grateful for both of you to be in this world with you and trying to, bring about some form of justice in our lives and doing that work. And so thank you again. And again, Destiny, wherever you are, I missed you. We missed you.
We miss you, Destiny.
and we will see you next week. We'll figure out the glitches. But I did want to mention that there are other episodes of Just Talk Live. You can go to justiceunbound.org/Just Talk Live, and all those episodes, including this one, will be up there. And we will see you all next week, because we will be here. We're always here Tuesday at 6 p.m. Eastern Time for another episode, and Destiny will be with us again. So until next time, blessings, my friends.